The jarring trill of her cell phone bisected the hushed atmosphere of the hospital waiting room. Mallory clawed through her bag, her pulse a frantic drum against her ribs, a restricted number. "Hello?" she breathed, scarcely louder than a ghost. "Ms. Hayes, this is Dr. Albright from St. Jude's, calling with an update on your grandmother." The physician's tone held a somber weight. "Is she—" Mallory started, fear constricting her windpipe. "Her condition remains stable for now, but we've observed a decline. The infection isn't responding to treatment as hoped, and her kidneys are faltering. While we are exploring every avenue, I must be candid. The outlook isn't promising." The words landed with the force of a blow to the chest. She crumpled onto the unforgiving plastic seat, the phone slick in her trembling grip. "What does that signify?" she whispered. "It means we need to explore extended care options. Furthermore, Ms. Hayes, the escalating medical expenses are becoming quite concerning." Mallory choked back a sob, a painful knot lodging in her throat. She was already juggling 2 jobs, barely staying afloat. How could she possibly shoulder the burden of long-term care? I'm at a loss," she rasped, despair thick in her voice. "I understand this is a difficult situation, Ms. Hayes, but we must explore all possibilities." The doctor's voice, though sympathetic, retained a professional edge. "Please come in tomorrow so we can discuss this further." The line went dead, leaving Mallory adrift in a sea of shock. She stared, unseeing, at the opposite wall, the doctor's pronouncements reverberating in her mind. Extended care, soaring bills, grim prognosis. It all coalesced into one horrifying truth. She was losing her grandmother, and financial ruin loomed. She lurched from the waiting room into the invigorating chill of the autumn air, crimson and gold leaves pirouetting around her ankles like discarded dreams. She had to take action. She had to unearth a solution. That evening, fueled by stale coffee and raw desperation, Mallory hunched over her laptop, meticulously combing through online job boards. Entry-level positions, part-time opportunities, any avenue to generate supplemental income. She scrolled through listings for retail associates, fast food personnel, and pet caregivers, her eyes gritty with exhaustion. Each automated rejection, each unanswered query felt like another hammer blow to her spirit. The usual resources yielded nothing viable. She expanded her search, venturing into the murkier depths of the internet. The advertisements were unconventional, peculiar tasks, bizarre requests, and promises of exorbitant compensation that reeked of falsehood. She disregarded the majority, but one particular ad snagged her attention. Caretaker required, secluded residence, generous remuneration. The ad was terse, almost enigmatic. No corporate identity, no detailed job specifications, merely a skeletal outline of the location, a cabin nestled in the Blackwood Mountains, and the assurance of lavish pay for the appropriate candidate. There was a single contact address. Mallory hesitated, a knot of apprehension tightening in her stomach. The entire proposition felt wrong. A remote cabin, extravagant compensation. It screamed deceit, or even something more sinister. However, the desperation consuming her overwhelmed her reservations. She was out of options. She clicked the link and drafted a concise email, emphasizing her experience tending to her grandmother and her steadfast work ethic. She appended a resume, omitting less relevant employment, and clicked send, her fingers crossed so tightly they throbbed. A swift reply arrived in under an hour. Succinct and to the point, it extended an invitation to interview the following day. The email contained an address in a small northern town roughly an hour's drive. Mallory scrutinized the message repeatedly, her anxiety escalating. The speed of the response, the lack of specificity, the isolated setting, it all triggered warning signals. This was imprudent, she realized. She should probably notify someone, perhaps even involve law enforcement. But then she envisioned her grandmother's fragile countenance, the intricate network of tubes and wires sustaining her, the overwhelming bills accumulating on her kitchen counter. She couldn't afford the luxury of caution. She had to pursue this. The following morning, Mallory steered north, the terrain becoming progressively barren as she departed the city limits. The highway dwindled into a sinuous country lane, flanked by towering pines and thick undergrowth. A sense of disquiet descended as she ventured deeper into the wilderness, her cell signal sputtering intermittently. She located the town listed in the email, a scattering of ramshackle structures clustered around a petrol station and a general store. The atmosphere hung heavy with the aroma of pine and damp earth. She pulled into the gas station, seeking directions. The attendant, a wizened old man with eyes that seemed to harbor unspoken tales, regarded her with suspicion. "Abernathy Place?" he croaked, his voice like the rustle of parchment. "Up Blackwood Road, can't miss it, but if I were you, I'd stay clear." Mallory's pulse fluttered erratically. "Why not?" The old man shrugged, his gaze averted. "Just ain't right up there. Bad things happen in that neck of the woods." Mallory summoned a smile. "I'm simply going for a job interview." The old man shook his head slowly, his expression a mixture of pity and foreboding. "Good luck to you, girl. You'll need it." Disregarding his chilling words, Mallory proceeded up Blackwood Road, the pavement dissolving into a deeply rutted track. After what felt like an age, she spotted it, a substantial, imposing cabin nestled deep within the forest. It resembled more of a manor than a rustic dwelling, 3 stories tall with darkened shuttered windows and an expansive veranda that encircled the entire edifice. A massive stone chimney ascended from the heart of the roof, and the air vibrated with the scent of burning wood. As she turned into the lengthy gravel driveway, the front door swung open and a woman emerged. She was statuesque and slender, with ebony hair sculpted into a severe chignon and intense cerulean eyes that seemed to dissect Mallory with unnerving precision. She wore a simple yet elegant dress of forest green. "Miss Hayes?" she inquired, her voice a polished monotone. "I'm Mrs. Abernathy. Please, come in." Mallory paused momentarily, a wave of trepidation surging through her. The cabin possessed a stark beauty, but radiated an aura of isolation, and Mrs. Abernathy's bearing was unnerving, but she reminded herself of her purpose. She needed this employment. She inhaled deeply and exited the vehicle, forcing a smile. "Thank you for seeing me." Mrs. Abernathy inclined her head, her expression enigmatic. "Please, come inside. My husband is eager to make your acquaintance." Mallory followed her into the cabin, the weighty wooden door swinging shut behind her with a solid resonance. The interior was even more impressive than the exterior, with soaring ceilings, intricate millwork, and period furnishings. A fire blazed in the immense stone hearth, casting flickering patterns across the room. Mr. Abernathy awaited in the living room, positioned near the fire. He was a man of considerable stature, with a severe countenance and an air of dominance. He sported a tailored suit, and his dark hair was slicked back from his brow. He favored Mallory with a curt nod. "Ms. Hayes," he intoned, his voice resonating with authority, "thank you for coming. Please be seated." The interview proceeded swiftly and superficially. The Abernathys posed minimal questions, concentrating primarily on Mallory's availability and her commitment to extensive hours. Their primary concern seemed to be her willingness to adhere to directions rather than her concrete skills. Ultimately, Mr. Abernathy leaned forward, his gaze piercing. "There is one stipulation you must comprehend, Ms. Hayes. We prize privacy above all else. We expect absolute discretion. Can you assure us of your capacity for that?" Mallory nodded, her throat suddenly parched. "Certainly." "Excellent," Mr. Abernathy stated, a hint of a smile gracing his lips. "Then I believe we have an understanding." Mrs. Abernathy escorted Mallory to a small, sparsely decorated chamber on the upper floor. "This will be your room," she said. "Lily will be delighted to meet you." "Lily?" Mallory asked. "Our daughter. You will act as her caretaker. She is a singular child." Mallory's unease intensified. The Abernathys were peculiar. Their abode exuded a sense of oppression, and the reference to a singular child only heightened the enigma. She was about to probe further when Mrs. Abernathy interjected, her voice taking on an edge. "There exists one rule, Ms. Hayes, and it bears the utmost significance. Under no circumstances are you permitted to unlock the basement door. Is that clear?" Mallory regarded her, puzzled. "The basement door? Why?" Mrs. Abernathy's expression hardened. "That is not your concern. Suffice it to say that if you violate this rule, there will be consequences." Mallory nodded slowly, her mind swirling. What lay within the basement, and why were the Abernathys so resolved to keep it secured? "And one final note," Mrs. Abernathy continued, her tone now gentler. "Lily occasionally utters things. Disregard them. Do not dwell upon them. Simply disregard them." "Utters things?" Mallory repeated, perplexed. Mrs. Abernathy sighed, a sound laden with weariness. "She has an overactive mind, that is all." With that, Mrs. Abernathy spun and exited the chamber, abandoning Mallory to her mounting sense of dread. She surveyed the room, noticing a subtle hairline fracture tracing across the ceiling. She shivered, notwithstanding the warmth emanating from the fire below. She knew, deep down, that she was committing an error. She should pivot, return to her vehicle, and flee as far as possible from this location. But she couldn't. Her grandmother was depending on her. The price of desperation, she mused, could be far steeper than she had imagined. The Abernathy offer. Mallory pecked at the keyboard, her pulse a hummingbird against her ribs. Each keystroke was a frantic drumbeat. "Caretaker position," she typed, then stalled. What more could she possibly offer? Despair threatened to drown her. Opting for brevity, she crafted a concise, formal request. "Deeply interested. Please advise best time to connect." She reread the words, flinching. Too needy, too exposed. Time, however, was a vanished commodity. She clicked send. An automated reply pinged back almost instantly, followed by a direct message from an E. Abernathy. "Inquire for phone interview. Indicate availability." A number followed. A shiver traced its way down Mallory's spine. This was it. She responded, suggesting a morning slot. A clipped confirmation arrived seconds later, businesslike and devoid of warmth. Sleep was a battlefield. Every settling of the building became a monstrous tread, each shadow a looming figure. She thrashed, visions of gleaming chrome and insurmountable debts dancing behind her eyelids. The phone shrilled at 10 sharp. Mallory's hand hovered, her heart a frantic bird. She inhaled deeply, then answered. "Mallory Hayes?" The voice was female, precise, and carried an air of ingrained authority. Speaking, "Eleanor Abernathy here. Thank you for your swift reply. Several preliminary questions." Mallory steeled herself. The inquiries felt less like genuine interest and more like a rigid checklist. Her childcare experience was adequate, her availability immediate, her willingness to relocate complete. Mrs. Abernathy seemed to pay scant attention to the replies, merely marking items on some unseen document. Then arrived the unexpected. "Are you easily unsettled?" Mallory hesitated. "Not particularly," she answered untruthfully. "Does a secluded environment pose a problem?" "No, I appreciate solitude." Another fib. She yearned for the urban cacophony. "Are you prone to superstition, Miss Hayes?" The question hung in the air, dense with implication. Mallory chose her response with utmost care. "I respect all beliefs," she parried. A pause. "Very well. We assess you as potentially suitable. Compensation, $3,000 monthly, full expenses covered. Primary responsibility, care of our daughter, Lily. She is a unique child. $3,000. Mallory nearly choked. Twice her current wage, a chance to rescue her grandmother. "There are caveats," Mrs. Abernathy continued, her voice losing its sharp edge. "Utmost discretion essential. You may not discuss your employment with anyone, ever. No visitors permitted on the property. Strict adherence to instructions, mandatory." Mallory swallowed hard. The terms were unnerving, but the money, a lifeline tossed to a drowning woman. "Understood," she affirmed. "Good. One final condition, inviolable. The cabin features a basement. You are forbidden from entering it. Under no circumstances are you to breach that door. Comprehend?" The stark command sent a chill deep into Mallory's bones. What lurked down there? "Yes," she whispered. "I comprehend." "Excellent. Transport will arrive tomorrow, 8 a.m. Pack accordingly. We anticipate your arrival, Miss Hayes." The line went dead, leaving Mallory reeling. She had committed. Nausea churned in her stomach. The secrecy, the isolation, the bizarre questions, the sinister basement injunction, all screamed danger. Yet, buried beneath the anxiety, a spark of hope flickered. $3,000. Enough. It had to be enough. The day dissolved in a blur, a desperate attempt to reconcile the euphoria of a potential solution with the creeping dread that shadowed her. She contacted the hospital, confirming the impending treatments. The figures remained astronomical, but now, with the Abernathy money, they seemed within grasp. Packing felt surreal. What did one prepare for when embarking upon a veiled task, in a place sworn to secrecy? She assembled essentials, warm garments, durable footwear, literature to stave off the isolation. She paused over a faded snapshot of her and her grandmother, taken years before in the park. Both radiated unadulterated joy. She slipped it into her bag, a fragile shield against the encroaching darkness. As she fastened her suitcase, a stark question echoed. What have I done? Sleep remained elusive that night. She lay rigid, staring at the ceiling, the image of the forbidding basement door seared into her mind. What clandestine secrets lay behind it? What horrors had she unwittingly embraced? She attempted to soothe herself. It was simply a job, a temporary fix for an urgent problem. She would tend to the child, earn the funds, and return home. Simple. But in her heart, she knew nothing was simple. She had stepped into a world of shadows and unspoken things, where the price of desperation might be more than she could afford. A sharp blare of a car horn jolted her awake. 7:58 a.m. early. She snatched her suitcase and hurried downstairs, her pulse hammering. A sleek black sedan idled at the curb, its windows impenetrably dark. A figure unfolded from the driver's seat, tall, imposing, clad in a somber suit. He offered no greeting, merely popped the trunk and indicated for her to load her belongings. Mallory complied, her hands numb. As she slid into the back seat, she caught a glimpse of his face in the rearview mirror. His eyes were flat, devoid of any detectable sentiment. The car eased away from the curb, gliding silently through the city. Mallory watched the familiar skyline recede, replaced by a growing sense of foreboding. She was leaving everything behind, venturing into the unknown. As they sped toward the secluded cabin and its mysteries, Mallory couldn't quell the sense that she was heading straight into a nightmare. Arrival at Blackwood Cabin. The final bend presented itself, a battered sign clinging precariously to a post. Blackwood Estates, private. Estates felt grandiose. The track was little more than a ravaged scar on the earth. The rental car protested each jolt with metallic complaints. Mallory, knuckles bone white, wrestled the wheel as a dense arboreal canopy devoured the last light. The air thickened, heavy with the perfume of decaying leaves and an undercurrent of something sharp, like old blood. Eventually, the trees relented, revealing a meager clearing dominated by the cabin. Stark was the only word for it. A somber, boxy edifice with a single, unblinking window. Paint hung in tattered streamers exposing weathered wood. The porch sagged wearily. No welcoming glow pierced the gloom, only a wisp of smoke hinting at habitation. As Mallory killed the engine, silence descended, not peaceful, but pregnant with apprehension. She hesitated, the enormity of her decision, a tangible weight. This was it, no retreat. Drawing a deep breath, she exited the vehicle, the crunch of gravel echoing unnaturally. Her cheap suitcase handle bit into her palm as she faced the cabin. The front door groaned open, revealing a figure framed against the dim interior. Eleanor Abernathy. Her face, gaunt and etched with worry, held eyes of startling azure intensity, magnified by the fading light. She wore a meticulously tailored gray dress, an incongruous elegance against the backdrop of decay. Behind her, a man shuffled forward, a shadow given form. "Mallory, welcome," Mrs. Abernathy greeted, her voice a precisely calibrated instrument. "The directions sufficed, I presume." "Yes, thank you," Mallory responded, forcing a smile. "The drive was interesting." "Indeed." A fleeting tightening was the closest Mrs. Abernathy came to a smile. "Silas, assist Mallory with her luggage." Silas materialized, long and stooped, his gaze perpetually earthbound. Each movement was measured, hesitant, as if treading on eggshells. He avoided Mallory's gaze as he relieved her of the suitcase. "Thank you," Mallory offered, but only received an unintelligible murmur before he retreated. "Lily awaits inside," Mrs. Abernathy announced, gesturing for Mallory to precede her. The porch groaned under Mallory's weight. Inside, the cabin air hung thick and stagnant, redolent of mildewed age. Mismatched furniture, seemingly salvaged from disparate eras, sparsely populated the room. A solitary lamp struggled to pierce the gloom with its weak, jaundiced light. In the corner, a girl occupied a rocking chair, her back presented to them. Lily, small and frail, with a curtain of dark hair obscuring her face, she remained motionless. "Lily, dear, we have a guest." Mrs. Abernathy's voice softened marginally. The girl turned slowly, her eyes, dark and immense, dominating her pale visage. She fixed Mallory with a prolonged, inscrutable stare. "Hello, Lily," Mallory offered gently. "I'm Mallory. I'm here to help take care of you." Lily offered no acknowledgement, only that unnerving scrutiny. Mrs. Abernathy cleared her throat. "Lily is reserved. She requires time to acclimate." Mallory nodded, trying to ignore a nascent unease. Profound sadness emanated from the child, a burden too weighty for such young shoulders. "Silas will escort you to your quarters," Mrs. Abernathy continued, modest but adequate. We'll discuss your obligations in the morning. Silas reappeared, still avoiding eye contact. He indicated a narrow hallway leading to a small room at the cabin's rear. It contained a Spartan bed, a diminutive dresser, and a single window overlooking the impenetrable woods. Clean, if austere. "Thank you," Mallory repeated to Silas. He offered a curt nod, then retreated without a word. Plunging her bag onto the bed, Mallory sank down, exhaustion settling upon her. She scanned the room, fighting a rising tide of dread. Something about this place felt intrinsically wrong. A sharp rap on the door startled her. Mrs. Abernathy filled the doorway, her expression unreadable. "One matter I mustn't neglect," she stated, her tone glacial. "A cardinal rule you must observe without exception." Mallory rose, her heart pounding. "Yes?" Mrs. Abernathy's gaze narrowed. "The basement. Under no circumstances are you to unlock the basement door. Understood?" Mallory swallowed hard. "The basement. Is there a problem?" "That is immaterial," Mrs. Abernathy snapped. "Simply understand that you are forbidden entry. Never open that door. Is that perfectly clear?" "Yes," Mallory whispered, barely audible. "Perfectly clear." Mrs. Abernathy regarded her intensely, her gaze unsettling. Then, without another word, she vanished, leaving Mallory alone in the silent chamber. The basement. Why the prohibition? What secrets did it conceal? Mallory shivered in the stuffy air. She turned to the window, staring into the all-consuming darkness where trees stood like silent watchmen, utterly isolated, severed from the world. Turning from the window, Mallory noticed something unusual. The floorboards beneath her feet felt peculiar. She knelt, tracing the rough planks with her hand. One spot radiated warmth, almost vibrating. She stood quickly, a chill racing down her spine. A faint scratching seemed to emanate from beneath the floor. The basement. She glanced at the door, a wave of icy fear surging through her. She had promised she should stay away. But curiosity, a relentless force, gnawed at her resolve. What awaited below? She forced herself to turn away, to unpack, to ignore the scratching, which seemed to intensify. But the image of the basement door and its hidden mysteries burned in her mind, whispers and scratches. The following day adopted a predictable rhythm, a subdued orchestration that failed to quell the unease simmering within Mallory. Lily, though still guarded, showed glimpses of warmth. Their afternoon study session revealed a sharp intelligence lurking behind the girl's quiet demeanor. Geometry, however, remained a stubborn obstacle. "All right, Lily, let's revisit this problem. Remember, this angle is supplementary to that one, meaning..." Mallory tapped the open textbook. Lily released a barely audible sigh, her gaze drifting towards the window, where the relentless wind wrestled with the branches of the old oak dominating the lawn. "They total 180 degrees?" "Precisely. See? You understand. Now, can you solve for x?" They persevered for another hour, the quiet broken only by the scratch of graphite and the delicate turning of pages. Lily's brow knitted in concentration, and Mallory felt an unexpected pull towards the girl's focused effort. This wasn't a pity case, just a student wrestling with equations like countless others. As twilight painted the sky with strokes of amethyst and charcoal, Mallory commenced dinner preparations. The kitchen, despite its size, felt strangely confining, the aged appliances droning a weary chorus. The fragrance of roasting chicken, laced with rosemary, permeated the air, a comforting scent that did little to alleviate her growing disquiet. Mrs. Abernathy, surprisingly, offered assistance. She moved with measured elegance, her hands, etched with time, exhibiting unexpected dexterity as she diced vegetables. They labored in near silence, punctuated only by the rhythmic chop of the knife and the occasional metallic chime of cookware. "Lily appreciates your presence," Mrs. Abernathy murmured, her voice a low rasp. "She hasn't connected with anyone for quite some time." Mallory paused, taken aback. "She's a clever girl, just a bit reserved." Mrs. Abernathy's lips thinned. "She's endured difficult times. This house holds echoes." She offered no further explanation, and Mallory refrained from pressing. The unsaid hung palpably in the air, another layer of enigma within Blackwood Estates. Dinner unfolded as a hushed affair. Silas's presence cast a shadow over the meal. He ate with unsettling intensity, his eyes flitting around the space, never quite settling. Lily uncharacteristically displayed a healthy appetite, a blush gracing her cheeks. Afterward, Mallory assisted Lily with her nightly routine, reading aloud from Alice in Wonderland, her voice softening as she recounted Alice's quirky journey. Lily listened intently, her eyes wide with fascination. For a fleeting moment, Mallory banished the strange house, the peculiar family, and the nagging suspicion that she was overlooking a crucial piece. Later, once Lily was asleep, Mallory sought refuge in her own quarters. She attempted to read, but her thoughts remained elusive. The house's silence pressed down, fractured only by the timber's aging complaints. She found herself listening intently, straining for any anomalous sound. Then it arrived, a faint, abrading sound. It emanated from below, from the direction of the cellar, subdued, almost imperceptible, like diminutive claws dragging across wood. Mallory held her breath, her pulse quickening. She reasoned it was merely the wind, or perhaps foraging rodents, but instinctively she recognized something else, something otherworldly. She slipped from the bed and crept to the room's edge, pressing her ear to the floor. The grating continued, a persistent, unsettling cadence. It was unmistakably originating from the basement. A tremor traced her spine. She willed herself to ignore it, to categorize it as nothing, yet the sound felt too insistent, too tangible to dismiss. The image of the secured cellar door sprung to mind, Mrs. Abernathy's firm warning resonating in her thoughts. Compelled by a morbid curiosity, Mallory tentatively cracked open the door. The hallway lay engulfed in shadow, illuminated only by a faint spill of moonlight from the distant window. She listened again. The rasping grew distinct, nearer. She closed the door, leaning against it, her breath catching in her throat. What lurked within that basement? What secrets did the Abernathys conceal? Sleep proved evasive for hours. Each creak, each groan, each rustle from the trees outside morphed into the grating sound, amplified and warped. She tossed and turned, her thoughts racing, until exhaustion finally prevailed. She awoke with a jolt, disoriented and heavy-limbed. The room remained dim, a thin line of light piercing the drapes. She glanced at the bedside clock, 3:17 a.m. As she lay there, attempting to shake off the lingering fog, the sound recurred, the scratching, but this time accompanied by something more, a murmur. Faint, almost inaudible, yet undeniably present, a low, susurrant sound spilling from Lily's room. Mallory rose and stole to the girl's door. She pressed an ear to the surface, listening. The whispering persisted, a rhythmic, almost mesmerizing drone. Mallory couldn't decipher the words, but could discern the cadence, the rise and fall of Lily's voice. Slowly, cautiously, she eased the door ajar. The room was flooded in lunar light, revealing Lily in her bed, her eyes wide, fixed on the floor. And then Mallory saw it. Lily wasn't merely staring, she was conversing with the floor. Her lips moved silently, forming words Mallory couldn't quite grasp. Her gaze centered on a spot near the baseboard, her expression one of intense focus. Mallory stood frozen, her heart hammering. What was Lily doing? Who was she addressing? The whispering continued, a low, unsettling murmur that seemed to saturate the room. A chill permeated Mallory's being. She wanted to speak, to intervene, yet found herself paralyzed by trepidation and bewilderment. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Lily ceased. She blinked, as if emerging from a trance, then slowly turned her head, her eyes locking with Mallory's. For a moment, they stared at each other, neither uttering a word. Then, Lily's eyes widened in stark terror. "You shouldn't have seen that," she breathed, her voice trembling. Before Mallory could react, Lily yanked the covers over her head, curling into a tight ball, her body trembling uncontrollably. Mallory remained rooted to the spot, unsure of how to proceed. She longed to comfort Lily, to soothe her, but felt too shaken, too utterly bewildered. She eased the door shut, retreating to her room, her mind spinning. The scratching, the whispering, the locked cellar, it was all interwoven somehow, and Mallory was beginning to suspect she had stumbled upon something far more malevolent than she could have conceived. Growing unease. A faint, abrasive sound began to intrude upon the afternoon's quiet. Mallory, perched on the library window seat, feigning focus on Lily's disastrous attempt at a spelling test, initially shrugged it off. Homes this old whispered their history, she told herself. Pipes shuddered, timber groaned, unseen inhabitants rustled within the walls. Blackwood Estates was likely a symphony of groans and sighs she hadn't yet learned to interpret, but the scratching returned, growing bolder. It was a rhythmic, almost panicked sound, as if nails were scoring the grain of raw timber. Mallory stilled, attempting to isolate the source from the soughing of wind through the ancient oaks. It originated below, the basement. She glanced at Lily, absorbed in a drawing at the table, her brow a tight knot of concentration. The girl seemed deaf to the world, her small hand confidently sketching what looked like a skeletal tree against an endless twilight. Mallory cleared her throat. "Lily, sweetie, do you hear that?" Lily didn't look up. "Hear what, Mallory?" Her voice was toneless, an empty vessel. "That scratching. It's been happening for a while." Finally, Lily lifted her gaze, her pale eyes locking with Mallory's. A fleeting, indecipherable expression flickered within them, gone before Mallory could name it. "The house is noisy," she stated simply, and returned to her art. Mallory frowned. She was sure Lily detected it. It had become a near-constant presence, burrowing beneath her skin, an irritating whisper at the edge of awareness. She tried to refocus on the test, but the words blurred. She marked another error, rain mangled into rain, and sighed. Her grandmother's looming medical expenses pressed down on her, a weight that eclipsed everything else. She needed this position. She needed the income. She couldn't allow some odd sounds or even some hidden history to throw her off track. It was just the house, she reasoned, an aging, neglected structure settling into the earth. Perhaps rodents infested the basement, or maybe, just maybe, it was nothing at all. However, as days bled into weeks, the scratching intensified. Its frequency increased, its insistence sharpening, its volume amplified. It invaded her sleep, twisting into a disturbing chorus of whispers and scrapes, a hidden choir trying to claw their way into her mind. She began to avoid the downstairs hallway, the one that provided access to the kitchen, and, more significantly, to the basement. Entrance. She took circuitous routes to bypass it, her pace quickening as she approached, her breath hitching in her throat. Lily, too, seemed to undergo a shift. She grew even more detached, even more taciturn. She picked at her food, pushing it around her plate with a vacant look. Her drawings darkened, became more unsettling, contorted shapes lurking in shadow, eyes that seemed to follow Mallory's every move. One afternoon, Mallory discovered Lily sitting on the hallway floor, fixated on the basement door. Her small hand hovered just above the wood, as if sensing something. "Lily?" Mallory asked softly, approaching with caution. Lily jolted, startled, and quickly retracted her hand. Her eyes were wide, reflecting a mix of apprehension and something else Mallory couldn't quite fathom. "What are you doing, honey?" Mallory inquired, kneeling beside her. "Nothing," Lily mumbled, avoiding eye contact. "Just looking." "Looking at what?" Lily shook her head, her lips forming a tight line. Mallory reached out and gently touched Lily's arm. "Are you frightened, Lily?" Lily flinched at the contact. "No," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "I'm not frightened." But her eyes betrayed her. That night, Mallory lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the scratching echoing relentlessly. It was louder now, more insistent than ever. It sounded almost as if something was desperate to break free, to escape its prison. She tossed and turned, unable to find a comfortable position. She attempted to convince herself that it was just the wind, just the aging house settling, just her imagination running wild. But deep down, she knew better. She knew that something was profoundly amiss at Blackwood Estates, and she had a growing, nauseating feeling that she was trapped in the middle of it. The cost of desperation, she pondered, was often steeper than one imagined. She had come to Blackwood Estates searching for a solution to her financial woes, a brief reprieve from the relentless pressure of her grandmother's illness. But she was beginning to suspect that she had stumbled into something far more ominous, something that could take from her more than just her tranquility. She shut her eyes, attempting to quell the noise, the fear, the creeping dread that was consuming her. But it was futile. The scratching persisted, unyielding, a constant reminder of the secrets buried beneath the floorboards, the darkness that loomed just beyond the basement entrance. Lily's fear. The aroma of simmering chicken noodle soup usually filled the kitchen with a sense of comforting warmth, but today it felt thin, inadequate against the chilling dread that had taken root. Lily sat at the table, a small, pale figure dwarfed by the high-backed chair. She hadn't touched her soup, her gaze fixed not on the bowl, not on Mallory, but on a point somewhere beyond, somewhere down. Mallory followed the line of Lily's vision. It led, inevitably, to the basement door. It was a plain, wooden door, painted the same creamy white as the surrounding walls, unremarkable save for the heavy iron latch that secured it, or was supposed to secure it. Mallory had checked it countless times since the incident. It held for now. But Lily's eyes held no such reassurance. They were wide pools of dark anxiety reflecting the faint light of the kitchen. A tremor ran through her small frame, barely perceptible, yet undeniable. "Lily, honey, are you all right?" Mallory asked, her voice soft, laced with concern. She knelt beside the child, placing a gentle hand on her arm. Lily flinched, a startled movement like a trapped bird. "Lily?" Mallory repeated, her touch lighter this time. Lily blinked, her gaze snapping back to Mallory as if surfacing from a deep, dark well. She mumbled, her voice barely audible. "You seemed far away," Mallory said, choosing her words carefully. "Is something the matter? Does your tummy hurt?" Lily shook her head slowly, her eyes darting back towards the basement door for the briefest of seconds. "No," she whispered. Mallory persisted, her concern growing. "Are you cold? Would you like a blanket?" She knew it was more than that. Something deeper, darker. Another shake of the head. slower, more deliberate this time. Number. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable, punctuated only by the gentle bubbling of the soup on the stove. Mallory tried a different approach. The soup is getting cold. Why don't you try a bite? I made it just the way you like it, with extra noodles. Lily remained unresponsive, her eyes fixed on some unseen horror only she could perceive. Mallory felt a prickle of unease crawl down her spine. It wasn't just the scratching anymore. It was Lily's reaction, her palpable fear that truly unnerved her. Mallory steered the conversation to a more comfortable topic. I thought after lunch we could work on some more painting. How does that sound? A barely perceptible flicker of interest crossed Lily's face, then vanished as quickly as it appeared. She glanced at the basement door again, her brow furrowed in a silent plea. Mallory tried to follow Lily's line of sight without being too obvious, focusing on the door itself. There was nothing there, nothing to see, just a door. But Lily's fear was real, tangible. It hung in the air like a shroud, suffocating the warmth and comfort Mallory had tried so hard to create. "Lily," Mallory said, her voice firm but gentle, "is there something you want to tell me? Is something bothering you?" Lily's eyes welled up with tears. She shook her head again, more violently this time, her small body trembling. "No," she choked out, her voice laced with a desperate plea. "Please." The raw fear in Lily's voice stopped Mallory in her tracks. She couldn't push her, not when she was so clearly distressed. She changed her approach, deciding on gentle reassurance. "It's okay, Lily," Mallory said softly, reaching out to take her hand. Lily's hand was cold and clammy, her fingers gripping Mallory's with surprising strength. "You don't have to tell me anything you don't want to. I'm just here for you, remember? I'm here to take care of you." Lily stared at Mallory, her eyes searching, questioning. Mallory offered a reassuring smile, hoping to convey the sincerity of her words. "I'm always here to listen," Mallory said. "Always." Lily blinked, a single tear escaping and tracing a path down her pale cheek. She didn't speak, didn't offer any explanation. She just sat there, her gaze fixed on the basement door, her small hand clenching Mallory's as if it were a lifeline. Mallory squeezed Lily's hand, her mind racing. What was Lily so afraid of? What did she know about the basement? And more importantly, what was happening down there? She resolved to stay close to Lily, to observe her, to try and decipher the source of her fear. She couldn't shake the feeling that Lily held the key to the secrets of Blackwood Estates, secrets that were slowly, inexorably drawing Mallory into their dark embrace. As they sat there, the silence broken only by Lily's shallow breaths, Mallory noticed something else, a subtle, almost imperceptible change in the atmosphere, a faint vibration, a tremor in the air, as if something was stirring beneath their feet. The scratching had stopped, replaced by something else, something expectant. Mallory felt a chill run down her spine. She glanced at the basement door, then back at Lily. Lily's eyes were wide with terror, her gaze locked on the door, her lips moving silently, as if she was communicating. Mallory strained her ears, trying to discern what Lily was saying. It was just a whisper, barely audible, but she thought she caught a single word, repeated over and over again. "Soon," Lily whispered, "soon." The knocking, the third night dissolved into the fourth, the passage of time marked solely by the elongation of shadows that danced across Lily's room during their nightly ritual. Mallory found those shadows increasingly captivating, a canvas upon which she sought meaning, solace. Tonight, The Velveteen Rabbit was once more Lily's request, her voice a soft, almost trance-like drone as she echoed Mallory's reading. A subtle rasping from the cellar, lessened tonight, seemed to echo the cadence of Lily's words, a morbid echo to the gentle tale. Eventually, exhaustion dragged Mallory back to her room, the floorboards offering their usual creaking protest underfoot. Sleep descended swiftly, a profound, dreamless state that enveloped her. Then the pounding began. No longer the furtive scrape of claws against the wood. This was a brutal, insistent declaration, a fist smashing against the cellar door with remorseless force. The sound ripped through the silence, a crude assault that jolted Mallory awake. Her eyes flew open, heart surging. Disoriented, she pushed herself upright, the cotton sheet a tangled restraint around her legs. The battering persisted, a steady, rhythmic pulse that throbbed through the entire structure. It wasn't merely a sound, it was a tremor that vibrated through the very bedrock of the house. A wave of dread washed over her, a frigid, constricting grip. This was unlike before. This threatened. The scratching had been unsettling, an insidious whisper in the gloom. This was a primal scream. She lurched from the bed, bare feet meeting the frigid plank floor. The blows intensified, rattling window panes, infusing the glass with a low, ominous drone. A small framed picture, a pastoral scene she hadn't registered previously, toppled from the wall, shattering on the floor in a shower of sharp fragments. Lily. The breath caught in her throat. She had to reach Lily. She groped for the doorknob, her fingers stiff and unresponsive. The hallway stretched before her, an elongated gauntlet of shadows, thick with unseen menace. The pounding escalated, each impact sending shuddering waves through the walls. The air vibrated with a tangible sense of terror, a suffocating weight. Upon reaching Lily's door, she detected a child's whimper from within. "Soon," Lily breathed, her voice barely audible above the din. "Soon, soon." Mallory flung the door open. Lily huddled in the corner of her bed, her small form vibrating with fear. Her eyes were dilated, fixed on some unseen horror beyond Mallory's shoulder. The battering resounded, a relentless cadence that filled the room, obliterating all other sound. "Lily!" Mallory exclaimed, rushing to her side. "What is it? What's happening?" Lily did not respond, her unwavering gaze fixed on some spectral point, her lips moving soundlessly as she chanted the same word. "Soon." Mallory seized Lily's hand, the skin clammy. The assault on the cellar door intensified, shaking the bed, vibrating the furniture. It felt as though the entire structure was about to implode around them. She hauled Lily from the bed, pulling her close. "We need to get out of here," she yelled, her voice barely penetrating the cacophony. "We need to leave now." But where could they escape? The storm raged outside, a savage symphony of wind and deluge. The cabin was isolated, marooned miles from the nearest town. They were imprisoned. The pounding reached an apex, a deafening roar threatening to shatter her mind. She felt a surge of primal fear, a visceral dread stripping away all vestiges of bravery. She was isolated, trapped in a remote cabin with a traumatized child, and something was striving to breach their sanctuary, something dwelling in the darkness below. She pulled Lily close, shielding her from the unseen abomination. The incessant pounding persisted, relentless, unyielding, and within the deafening roar, Mallory believed she discerned something else, a faint guttural murmur seeming to seep into the very marrow of her bones, a voice from the abyss. It did not form intelligible words, yet she sensed an unadulterated malevolence, a hunger that throbbed with each impact against the basement door. It was a promise of unspeakable horrors. She squeezed her eyes shut, her body shaking uncontrollably. This was her reckoning, the price of her desperation, the consequence of disregarding the omens. She had come seeking a refuge, a way to salvage her grandmother. Instead, she had stumbled into an unfolding nightmare. The battering endured, a relentless assault on her senses, and in the suffocating darkness she waited, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs, for the unavoidable. She did not know what lay on the other side of that door, but she knew, with a chilling certainty, that it was coming for them, breaking the rule. The echoes of the pounding still reverberated, a dull ache in Mallory's very core. Lily slept at last, her breathing shallow and uneven. But sleep remained a distant shore for Mallory, perched vigilantly at the bedside, a silent guardian against the lurking menace below. Each impact, each guttural rumble had struck at her dwindling courage. How could she feign normalcy? How could she ignore the tremors shaking the house? The unsettling sense of something trapped or evolving in the earth beneath them. Desperation's toll, she reflected with stinging regret, was a willingness to dismiss every red flag. Her grandmother's well-being demanded the specialized care Blackwood Estates alone offered, a few strange regulations, a dilapidated mansion, a bargain, she'd convinced herself. Now, doubt clawed at her. She scrutinized Lily. Even in slumber, the child's complexion was ashen. The shadows beneath her eyes deepened. Lily's appetite had vanished. Was it pure terror, or some insidious influence? Mallory slipped from the room, her feet soundless on the aged planks. At the master bedroom door, she hesitated. The Abernathys remained sequestered behind it, their voices a hushed murmur, their presence as substantial as ghosts. Did they even register the disturbance? Or worse, were they complicit, indifferent to the horror unfolding? She turned toward the basement stairs. The stout oak door seemed to taunt her with its unwavering stillness. A lone brass knob, tarnished with age, glimmered faintly in the gloom of the hall. The prohibition: never unlock the basement. Her fingers brushed the cold metal. What choice did she have? To simply wait for whatever festered down there to erupt, to pretend Lily wasn't withering before her very eyes. She conjured her grandmother's image, frail, yet clinging fiercely to life. She recalled the sacrifices made for her, and then Lily, a child imprisoned by dread, her gaze reflecting knowledge no one her age should possess. Enough. Fear coiled within her, a frigid constrictor in her gut. But beneath it ignited a different emotion, a searing protectiveness for Lily, a desperate need for answers, and a burgeoning resentment toward the Abernathys for their blatant neglect of their own daughter. A chilling certainty settled over her. Whatever festered below was intertwined with Lily's suffering. The girl's fixation with the floorboards, her whispered dialogues with unseen entities, the tremor she displayed with every creak and shudder of the dwelling, all converged on the same point. The Abernathys had entrusted Lily to her keeping, and Mallory, despite her trepidation, couldn't stand idly by while some lurking evil devoured her charge, even at the cost of breaking their cardinal rule. She conjured Mrs. Abernathy's glacial glare, Mr. Abernathy's unnerving smile. She envisioned the ramifications: dismissal, expulsion from Blackwood Estates, her grandmother's care put in jeopardy, but the vision of Lily's haunted face eclipsed everything. Mallory inhaled deeply, the stale air filling her lungs. She closed her eyes, picturing her grandmother's face, recalling her fortitude, her unwavering spirit. She would find a solution. She would shield Lily even from the unspeakable dread that awaited her. Her grip tightened on the knob. It was frigid, Unyielding, she faltered for a microsecond, her mind racing with possible outcomes, each more petrifying than the last. But there was no time for hesitation. She had to know the truth. She had to witness it. Propelled by a surge of adrenaline, she twisted the knob. The click echoed in the silent hallway, amplified by the gravity of her decision. A small sound, almost inconsequential, yet it resonated like a thunderclap, tearing through the fragile tranquility of the house. The door remained closed, immobile, impenetrable, but the click had broken the spell, unleashed something into the atmosphere. Mallory could sense it, a change in the air, a tingling on her skin, a sense of expectancy that throbbed like a pulse. She paused, her senses on high alert. The house seemed to hold its breath. Even the wind had stilled outside. The silence was absolute, save for the frantic drumming of her own heart. Then, a faint whisper, so soft she nearly missed it. It seemed to emanate from the far side of the door, a sibilant murmur that sent an icy tendril down her spine. "At last!" Mallory's hand froze on the knob. The whisper was too near, too intimate. It felt as if it originated within her own mind, a thought that had found a voice. She fought down the overwhelming urge to slam the door shut, to flee to Lily and barricade themselves within her sanctuary. But she knew that such action would not suffice. Whatever lurked down there would not simply vanish with disregard. It would only grow stronger, more demanding, until it inevitably broke free. She took another deep breath, struggling to retain her composure. She had made her decision. She had transgressed the rule. There was no retreating now. With a measured, deliberate motion, she pressed the door open. The wrong door. The handle's chill bit into Mallory's sweating hand. A tremor ran through her as she tightened her grip, knuckles bone white. Each inhalation felt like dragging lead, the air thick and unmoving. Lily, perched on the stairs above, stared down, eyes like polished jet reflecting the meager light. Beneath the fear mirroring her own, Mallory glimpsed something unsettling, a spark of morbid curiosity. This was the point of no return. Mallory squeezed her eyes shut, a vision of her grandmother surfacing, a frail hand reaching, eyes pleading. That image solidified her will. For Nana, she had to do this. Inhaling deeply, she rotated the handle. No click, no resistance. It turned, yielding with an unsettling smoothness, as if welcoming her doom. As the latch gave, a sound resonated, not a creak, but a profound, sorrowful exhalation. The house itself seemed to grieve, stone and wood lamenting her intrusion. Dust motes pirouetted in the faint light, agitated by some unseen force. With a drawn-out shriek that grated against Mallory's bones, the heavy door swung inward. A gust of air, ripe with the must of decay, and a nameless, ancient odor billowed out. It was a frigid draught, leaching warmth, clinging like grave clothes. Then Lily's scream, a fractured, desperate sound that hammered against the oppressive silence of the house. Not just a scream, but a physical recoil, her hands flying to her ears as she squeezed her eyes shut. Mallory's stomach dropped. "Lily!" she cried, instinctively reaching out. But the girl was unreachable, lost in a private terror. Her small frame vibrated, her face a grotesque mask of fear. A whisper, thin and reedy, slithered from the basement's maw, brushing against Mallory's ear like an icy caress. "Wrong door." The words, barely audible, struck with chilling precision, each syllable a shard of ice against her sanity. An age-old voice, heavy with the dust of centuries, tinged with a cruel amusement. Mallory recoiled, hand clamping over her mouth to stifle a gasp. Her face went numb, her skin clammy, her mind buckled, struggling to reconcile the impossible with reality. She peered into the inky depths, but saw only shadows, writhing and shifting in the gloom. The air thickened, heavy with a weight that pressed against her lungs. The odor intensified, a nauseating cocktail of mildew, rotting timber, and a metallic sweetness like aged blood. Lily's screams escalated, her body convulsing. Mallory knew she had to act, to shield Lily, to slam the door and imprison whatever horrors lurked within. But her limbs felt like stone, paralyzed by dread. She willed herself forward, but her legs refused to obey. The voice, the scream, the suffocating atmosphere had combined to immobilize her, body and soul. She had erred, a catastrophic error. She had opened the wrong door, and now, she dreaded, they would both suffer the consequences. Summoning her strength, Mallory commanded, "Lily, stop!" The words were a strained whisper above the girl's piercing cries. She edged closer, reaching out to gently grip Lily's shoulder. "It's okay. We're okay," she soothed, her voice quivering. "Just breathe, Lily. Breathe." Slowly, Lily's screams receded, replaced by ragged, uneven gasps. Her eyes remained sealed shut, her body still trembling, but the sharp edge of terror seemed to dull at Mallory's touch, her calming words. Mallory kept her hand on the girl's shoulder, anchoring herself in the present, battling the encroaching darkness and the insidious voice still echoing in her mind. "Come on, Lily," she urged, her voice firmer now, laced with determination. "Let's get out of here." She steered Lily down the hall, away from the open doorway, away from the shadows and the unspeakable things that awaited. She didn't dare glance back, didn't dare acknowledge the cold presence she knew lingered there, watching them, waiting. Reaching the relative haven of the living room, Mallory finally dared to inhale, to release the coiled tension. But a deep certainty settled within her. This was only the beginning. She had unleashed something terrible, and it could not be contained. Escape. The door whined in protest as Mallory slammed her weight against it, the flimsy frame threatening to splinter, the aged latch consumed by rust, stubbornly refused to engage, leaving a taunting gap of impenetrable shadow. She rammed it again, fueled by a surge of adrenaline, but the portal remained only partially open. "Lily, please." Her voice cracked, a fragile sound in the suffocating stillness that had blanketed the cabin. Snatching Lily's hand, Mallory's fingers dug into the child's smaller one. Paralyzed, Lily's wide eyes remained fixed on that sliver of darkness. "Lily!" A sharper tug finally roused a response, Lily's body resisting, then yielding to Mallory's pull. Wordlessly, they turned and fled. Mallory dared not break the silence. Every creak of the floorboards felt like pursuit, every rustle of leaves like the rasping breath of something unseen. She kept Lily pinned to her side, an arm a protective barrier against whatever they had awakened. The cabin door crashed shut behind them, the sound amplified in the hushed woods. Mallory didn't pause, didn't glance back. She simply ran, dragging Lily along, her lungs burning with each desperate gasp. The path, a treacherous weave of exposed roots and fallen limbs, became a torment. A stumble nearly sent her sprawling, her ankle buckling, but she fought through the pain, her only thought escape. Though small, Lily mirrored her pace, her face a bloodless mask, her eyes still reflecting the lingering horror. Trees towered, their branches a latticework of gnarled fingers threatening to ensnare. The air hung heavy, saturated with the musty aroma of damp earth and decay, a cloying perfume that choked Mallory's breath. A furtive glance revealed the cabin had already vanished, swallowed by the dense undergrowth. Even so, she pressed on, convinced she could feel something gaining, a frigid malevolence closing the distance. "We need the road," she rasped. her voice raw. "We have to get away from here." Lily offered no reply, only a reassuring squeeze of her hand, a silent acknowledgement of their shared terror. The woods seemed endless, the trees a monotonous wall of green. Her muscles screamed, her lungs ached, but she refused to yield. Lily depended on her. Finally, a break appeared. A gap in the canopy, sunlight piercing through the branches, a flicker of hope ignited within the oppressive gloom. They burst from the trees onto the paved road, the sudden openness and the drone of passing vehicles almost disorienting. Mallory halted, hands on her knees, struggling to breathe. Lily stood nearby, her frame trembling. The cracked asphalt radiated heat under the afternoon glare. Cars whizzed past, their occupants oblivious to the nightmare unfolding behind them. The normalcy felt surreal, like resurfacing from a plunge into madness. Straightening, Mallory's gaze swept the landscape. The Blackwood Estates sign loomed in the distance, its ornate script now appearing ominous and distorted. A tremor shook her as nausea swelled. "We're safe now," she whispered, the words lacking conviction. Even as she uttered them, she knew it wasn't true. They were out of the woods, but far from secure. Not yet. The image of that open basement door, that inviting sliver of darkness, the chilling whisper, was etched into her mind. She knew with a certainty that resonated deep within, that whatever they had unleashed wouldn't remain confined. It would pursue them. It would find them. Mallory looked at Lily, whose face was still pale and drawn. The girl's eyes held lingering fear, but something else was simmering beneath, an emotion Mallory couldn't define. "What was that?" Mallory asked, her voice shaking. "What was in the basement, Lily?" Lily remained silent, her expression inscrutable. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating, pregnant with unspoken dread. Mallory knew they couldn't linger. Blackwood Estates was no longer an option. She had to distance Lily as much as possible before it was too late. "Come on," she said, grasping Lily's hand once more. "We're leaving." She started walking along the road, away from the Blackwood Estates sign, away from the cabin, away from the darkness that beckoned. She didn't know their destination, only that they couldn't remain. Their survival depended on it. With each step, she felt the weight of her decision, the cost of their desperation. She had opened the door, she had unleashed the darkness, and now she must face the consequences. Protecting Lily was her only purpose, even if it meant sacrificing everything. Sheriff Brody. The sun-baked asphalt radiated heat, blurring the horizon. Lily, her small hand a vice around Mallory's, shuffled beside her. They walked an endless stretch, the air thick with unspoken dread. Each approaching vehicle sparked a fleeting ember of hope in Mallory, only to be doused by the whoosh of its passing. Finally, topping a gentle rise, Mallory spied salvation, a solitary phone booth, its glass streaked with grime, yet standing firm. "Let's go," she urged, tugging Lily along. Inside, the booth reeked of stale smoke and past desperation. Mallory's fingers, clumsy with anxiety, wrestled with the coins. She deposited them and dialed 911, her pulse a frantic drum against her ribs. The operator's cool, professional voice was a stark contrast to Mallory's inner turmoil. 911, what's your emergency?" "We need assistance," Mallory blurted, her voice cracking with strain. "We're on Route 12, near the Abernathy place. A terrible thing happened there." "Describe the situation," the operator requested, the initial warmth gone. Mallory hesitated, struggling to define the formless terror gripping her. "Something in the cellar. We unleashed it. It's dangerous. We require immediate help." Lily recoiled at the word cellar, burying her face into Mallory's side. An arm encircled her, offering a meager shield. Disbelief edged the operator's tone. "Ma'am, are you reporting a break-in?" "Not exactly. It's difficult to explain. Just please, dispatch someone. The sheriff, anyone." Mallory's plea was raw. "Understood. A unit will be sent to your location. Can you describe this entity you encountered?" Mallory squeezed her eyes shut. The swirling darkness and insidious whispers burned into her memory. I can't. Just hurry, please." She provided a concise description of the cabin's location and hung up, her hand trembling as she returned the receiver. Kneeling before Lily, she framed her face in her hands. "It'll be all right," she stated, trying to conjure conviction. "Help is coming." Lily's wide, unwavering stare reflected a fear that transcended words. Time crawled. Each rustle in the roadside brush, each distant engine sent a shiver of apprehension through Mallory. She held Lily close, her gaze fixed on the road. The sun transformed the phone booth into a sweltering box. At last, a distant wail sliced through the air, amplifying with each second. Mallory's breath hitched as a black and white cruiser braked beside them, scattering gravel. From the vehicle emerged a weathered man, his face a road map of time and toil. A tan uniform encased him, a silver star gleaming on his chest. "Sheriff Brody," the name tag declared. He approached cautiously, eyes narrowed, assessing their bedraggled state. "Ma'am," he rumbled, his voice gravelly. "Sheriff Brody. Dispatch relayed a report of some kind of incident?" Mallory rose, her legs unsteady. "Yes, Sheriff. We were at the Abernathy cabin, just up ahead. Something transpired there, something awful." Sheriff Brody's brow arched skeptically. "The Abernathy place? Been vacant for ages. Old man Abernathy passed on some time back, and his daughter hasn't been seen around here since. I was hired as a caretaker," Mallory explained, striving for composure. "For Lily Abernathy." She indicated the girl. Sheriff Brody focused on Lily, his features softening almost imperceptibly. "This little one? Well, He paused, studying Lily's face as if viewing a ghost, a spitting image of her mother at that age. His gaze returned to Mallory, skepticism resurfacing. "All right, ma'am. Why don't you tell me what went down?" Mallory recounted their experiences, beginning with their arrival and culminating in their desperate flight from the cellar. She depicted the oppressive atmosphere, the unsettling sounds, and the pervasive sense of foreboding. She stumbled over the description of the entity they'd unleashed, knowing how outlandish it sounded. Sheriff Brody listened patiently, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he expelled a slow breath. "Ma'am," he said gently yet firmly, "I appreciate your account, but truthfully, it's a tough story to buy. A deserted cabin, a silent child, and some thing in the cellar. Sounds like you've been through the ringer." "But it's true," Mallory insisted, her voice pitching higher. "We were there. We witnessed it. You have to believe me." Sheriff Brody sighed. "Here's what I'll do. I'll swing by this cabin, see if there's any corroboration for your story. You and the little one stay put. I'll be back shortly." He turned and retreated to his cruiser, his movements measured. Mallory watched him depart, her stomach churning with apprehension. She knew what he'd discover: an empty building, lacking any sign of the horror they had endured. Then he'd dismiss her as unstable, leaving them defenseless. Kneeling, she embraced Lily. "It's okay," she murmured, a hollow promise. "We'll resolve this. We must." Sheriff Brody returned an hour later, his face a mask of grimness. He parked in the same location and approached, his shoulders slumped. "All right, ma'am," he began, his voice devoid of emotion. "I checked the cabin, exactly as I recalled, deserted, dusty, unoccupied for years, no indication of any creature, nothing amiss whatsoever. despair engulfed Mallory. But the cellar was empty as well. Sheriff Brody cut in. Just a dirt floor and some dusty boxes, nothing to be alarmed about. He glanced at Lily, a flicker of compassion in his eyes. Maybe the little one had a nightmare. Children get scared sometimes. But I saw it, Mallory insisted, her voice quivering. We both did. Sheriff Brody shook his head. Ma'am, I understand you're distressed, but I can't chase phantoms based on a story. I have an entire county to oversee. He paused, his gaze hardening. I'm going to have to ask you to leave the property. I can escort you both to the bus depot in town. You can purchase passage back from whence you came. Mallory stared, her mind reeling. She was isolated. No one believed her. No assistance was forthcoming. What about Lily? She asked, her voice almost inaudible. What will become of her? Sheriff Brody sighed. I'll notify social services. They'll provide her with care, ensure she receives the necessary support. Mallory's heart constricted at the thought of Lily being taken, alone, and petrified. She wouldn't allow it. No, she declared, her voice gaining strength. I'm not leaving her. We are a package deal. Sheriff Brody regarded her, his expression a blend of exasperation and sympathy. Ma'am, you're making a mistake. You need to consider what's best for this girl. I am considering what's best for her, Mallory retorted, and what's best for her is to remain with me. I won't permit you to take her. Grasping Lily's hand, she pulled her close. Come on, she commanded, her voice resolute. We're going. She turned and began to walk down the road, away from the sheriff's cruiser, away from the cabin, away from the life she had imagined. She didn't know their destination, but she knew she was. The legend of Blackwood Cabin. The nebulizer's drone, a metallic sigh, battled Nana's raspy breaths in the cramped apartment. With a gentle touch, bordering on reverence, Mallory smoothed the oxygen mask. The Abernathy score had bought them precious time, granting Nana a few more months in her own bed, tended by nurses who, if not kin, were at least capable. Thank you, darling, Nana croaked, her voice as delicate as spun glass. Mallory's answering squeeze met papery skin, frail beneath her touch. Anything for you, Nana. Anything. And anything that involved suppressing the persistent disquiet at the Abernathy place, the unnerving sensation of surveillance, the icy currents that infiltrated the house, even on stifling afternoons. It meant dismissing Lily's unfocused gaze and the unsettling way the child would cock her head, as if deciphering unheard whispers. It culminated in opening that basement hatch. Mallory banished the memory. A familiar wave of nausea rolled over her. She'd rationalized it as mere curiosity, a need to identify the source of the ceaseless scratching. But a deeper impulse drove her, a desperate wager that the shadows below held a solution to something undefined, perhaps a remedy for Nana, an escape from their stifling existence, or simply an answer to the gnawing dread consuming her spirit. Now, months later, with Nana stabilized, yet far from well, and Lily vanished, Blackwood Cabin haunted her waking hours. The sheriff's callous dismissal still stung, his retreating figure a constant reminder of her isolation. She began by combing through online records linked to the Abernathys, birth certificates, property records, yellowed newspaper clippings, anything to illuminate the family's past, their link to the cabin, and the secrets they guarded so zealously. Leads proved scarce. The Abernathys were a withdrawn family, their lives swathed in privacy. She unearthed only fleeting mentions in archived news, quiet quiet acts of charity, anonymous donations to the town library and the historical society. Broadening her search, she delved into the history of Blackwood itself. She devoured local history sites, scrutinized digital archives of vintage newspapers, and even braved obscure online forums teeming with regional folklore and spectral tales. It was in one of these forgotten corners of the internet, buried within a thread about haunted locales in the region, that she stumbled upon it, an enigmatic reference to the legend of Blackwood Cabin. The post, several years old, came from a user named Whisperwind. It recounted an age-old tale whispered down through generations of Blackwood residents about a vengeful entity entombed beneath the land, shackled to the soil by a botched ritual. They say it slumbers under the oldest house. Whisperwind had written, protected by a series of portals. Only one offers true escape. Choose unwisely, and you unleash what should remain chained. Mallory's breath caught in her throat. Portals. The basement door. She spent the subsequent days consumed by the legend. She corroborated Whisperwind's claims, piecing together fragments from disparate online sources and historical journals. The story spoke of the first settlers who, hoping to exploit the Earth's energies, performed a forbidden rite to subjugate a powerful being. The ritual backfired, imprisoning the entity beneath the land, poisoning the earth around it. To restrain the spirit, they erected a network of defenses, both tangible and ethereal, each symbolized by a distinct door. One path, the true path, offered containment, a way to pacify the spirit, maintaining the equilibrium. The others, however, led to devastation, unleashing the entity's unbridled malice upon the world. The legend suggested the true path was fluid, influenced by the entity's capricious desires and the pulse of the earth. Only those attuned to the land, those who could decipher the spirit's murmurs, could discern the correct route. Mallory recalled Lily, her constant prattle, the sense that she communicated with something beyond human perception. Could Lily, in her naivete, have held the key? Had she instinctively known the true path, while Mallory, blinded by desperation, had chosen poorly? A chill traced her spine. The pieces coalesced into a terrifying mosaic. The Abernethys, the isolation, the basement, Lily's strange actions, all pointed to a concerted effort to confine something, to keep the entity trapped beneath Blackwood Cabin. And she, in her ignorance, had thwarted their efforts. She discovered a time-worn map of the Blackwood territory in an antique shop, its faded lines depicting the original farmsteads and landmarks. Blackwood Cabin was denoted with a small, unassuming mark, but beneath it, almost invisible, was an inscription in faded ink. Caveat ostium. Beware the door. Desperation's price, she understood, was often ignorance. So focused on Nana's survival, so consumed by the need for money, she had ignored the omens, dismissed her gut feelings, and blundered into a nightmare. Now she was reaping the whirlwind. But Nana was improving, not fully recovered, but improving. And the money meant they could leave this apartment, flee the city and its corrosive memories, flee the entity. But self-deception proved futile. She knew it wouldn't be that simple. Whatever she had unleashed in that basement wouldn't simply vanish. It would pursue her, stalk her, until it extracted its due. And she, Mallory Hayes, was now irrevocably bound to its grim fate. Agnes's tale. A thick, cloying humidity pressed down as Mallory navigated Willow Creek's main thoroughfare. The general store, complete with its porch swing and sun-bleached advertisements touting forgotten sodas, presented a charming facade of yesteryear. But Mallory's focus was razor-sharp. She sought answers, a quest that led her unerringly to Agnes Blackwood's humble abode. The town historian dwelled in a tiny, overflowing cottage, a chaotic repository of books, maps, and artifacts, each a silent testament to Willow Creek's lineage. Tales of Agnes abounded. Some deemed her eccentric, a recluse even. But all agreed, Blackwood held the key to the town's deepest secrets. Hesitation pricked at Mallory before she knocked against the time-worn door. Flaking paint revealed the wood beneath, shadowed by a hand-lettered sign reading, "History Speaks." She inhaled deeply and rapped her knuckles. With a protesting groan, the portal yielded, revealing Agnes. Her steel-gray hair was drawn back in a severe style, and behind thick lenses her eyes burned with keen intelligence. She wore a faded, floral-patterned dress and a cardigan that appeared to predate Mallory's very existence. "Mallory Hayes, if I'm not mistaken," Agnes greeted, her voice surprisingly robust. "I anticipated your arrival." Mallory blinked, taken aback. "You did?" "News travels on the wind in a place like this," Agnes responded, gesturing for Mallory to enter. "Especially when it concerns the Abernathy family." Inside, the cottage proved even more disordered than anticipated. Towers of books threatened to topple, maps papered the walls, and a motley collection of oddities, aged dolls, antique implements, and dulled silverware competed for space. The very air tasted of aged paper and ingrained dust. "Please have a seat." Agnes indicated a chair nearly consumed by a cascade of volumes. Mallory carefully excavated a spot and perched on the edge. "I need to understand the Abernathys," Mallory started, dispensing with pleasantries, "and the cabin, and whatever resides in its basement." Agnes's gaze sharpened. "You've opened Pandora's box, haven't you?" Mallory nodded, a shiver tracing its path down her spine. "I was ignorant. I just needed the job. My Nana. Desperation breeds folly," Agnes finished, a note of sympathy entering her voice. "The Abernathys understand that better than most." Agnes shuffled to a cluttered table and began sifting through a pile of documents. "The chronicle of the Abernathys and Blackwood Cabin is a labyrinthine one, stretching back to Willow Creek's genesis." She extracted a fragile, age-stained parchment. "They were among the first settlers, yet distinct. They delved into archaic practices, rituals best relegated to oblivion. They hungered for dominance, for forbidden knowledge. And the entity." Mallory's voice was barely audible. Agnes sighed heavily. It wasn't always such a thing. Initially, she was Alara, a gifted spiritualist seeking sanctuary within Willow Creek to practice her arts. But the Abernathys, driven by their insatiable avarice, perceived her as a commodity, a tool to be exploited. They craved dominion over her, to exploit her extraordinary abilities. What did they inflict upon her? Dread coiled in Mallory's stomach. "Deceit was their weapon," Agnes stated, her voice heavy. "They enticed her to the cabin, promising solace. It was a snare. They ensnared her with arcane rituals and sinister magic, attempting to usurp her power, to enslave her. But they failed completely." "They achieved a partial victory," Agnes corrected. "They diminished her, warped her essence. Yet her spirit proved too formidable to fully contain. Their hubris blinded them to her true strength. She retaliated, and in the ensuing conflict, a cataclysm occurred." Agnes paused, her eyes glazed with distant memory. Alara transformed into something else entirely, a specter of vengeance fueled by anguish and fury. Unable to eradicate her, they imprisoned her within the cabin's cellar, using the very incantations meant to bind her. "And the Pandora's box?" Mallory pressed, her thoughts racing. "The Abernathys erected the cabin upon a nexus, a locale where the barrier between realities weakens," Agnes elucidated. That basement door was never meant to be breached. It served as a seal, a blockade. By tampering with it, you undermined the prison, allowing Ilara's influence to leak out. Then why maintain the cabin at all? Why not obliterate it? Agnes regarded Mallory with a blend of compassion and understanding. Because the Abernathys clung to the delusion that they could still control her, that they could one day complete their initial endeavor. And further, the responsibility of containing her became their morbid inheritance, a perverted family legacy. "Lily," Mallory murmured, recalling the girl's peculiar comportment, her hushed dialogues with the floorboards. She was aware, wasn't she? She knew what lurked below. "Lily descends from those Abernathys," Agnes confirmed. "She inherited the burden, the secret. But she's just a child. Such a weight shouldn't rest on her shoulders." A wave of indignation surged through Mallory. They were prepared to sacrifice her? They would sacrifice anyone to perpetuate their control, Agnes retorted. Such has always been their way. "But why this moment?" Mallory persisted. "Why has the entity suddenly become so active now?" Agnes furrowed her brow. "Something must have eroded the seal. Perhaps the rituals have lost potency over time. Or perhaps something else transpired, disturbing the delicate balance." Mallory recalled the ancient tome she had unearthed in the basement, adorned with cryptic symbols. "I discovered a book," she disclosed. "An ancient text filled with rituals. Might that be connected?" Agnes's eyes widened dramatically. "Describe it." Mallory provided a meticulous description of the book, the symbols, the faded script, the brittle leaves. As she spoke, Agnes grew increasingly agitated. "That book," she finally breathed, her voice now trembling. "That's the Liber Maleficarum, the Book of Evils. It contains rituals of unimaginable danger. Where did you find it?" "In the basement," Mallory said, "concealed behind a loose stone." Agnes shook her head in disbelief. The Abernathys were playing with hellfire. They lacked understanding of the forces they were manipulating, and now everyone is imperiled. Mallory felt a chilling premonition wash over her. She had unleashed a monstrous force, jeopardizing not only the Abernathys, but the entire community. "How can I rectify this?" she pleaded. "How can I stop it?" Agnes met her gaze, her eyes mirroring a blend of hope and despair. "I cannot say for certain," she confessed. "But we must attempt. We must devise a means to recontain Ilara, to seal her away before she devours us all." Mallory recognized the gravity of her situation. She was merely a caretaker, a young woman striving to salvage her grandmother's well-being. But she had unlocked the wrong door, and now she must confront the dire repercussions. She had to shield Lily, safeguard Willow Creek, and defend herself against the encroaching darkness she had inadvertently released, and she would have to achieve this with the assistance of an eccentric historian and a considerable measure of fortune.